Good evening. Good evening. I love that music. 5, 10, 20 years ago, I never could imagine that I will be standing in before you this Sunday, January the 24th, 2021. My name is Annette Smith Lee, and I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Delta Omega Chapter. I am the chair of the Virginia Connection Committee for the Mid Atlantic region. Alpha Kappa Alpha Selection Committee is our social action arm. It is my pleasure to bring you greetings. Thank you all for being with us today. Along with us, our brothers from Alpha Phi Alpha. We are very pleasure to have to greet and welcome you to our first Pham Legislative Day 2021 Town Hall meeting. Chaos to community, and where do we go from here? Hey, I have an alpha with me today, and I will allow him to introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Brown, member of Omicron Alpha Lambda chapter out of Fredericksburg, Virginia, of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And I am the sepia chair for VACAPAF. Now, you may ask, what is sepia? Sepia stands for social, economic, political involvement and action. Involvement and action in those three areas. That's what we're here to do today. So in collaborating with the AKAs, we're excited to present to you this joint legislative program. We hope that the information presented will be useful as we continue to serve and advocate for our community. So without further ado, let us present. Without further ado, we're going to open up with a quick prayer. And then after I pray, we're going to present our regional leadership. So if you could bow with me for a second, a quick word. Most Holy Father, we come right now thanking you for allowing us to be here at this appointed time, at this appointed place, to hear what legislation has occurred and will be occurring that can help your people. As we go through this town hall, let us open our ears and be recipients of the word that comes from the speakers. Let it resonate with us as we develop plans and programs to process within our communities. Bless the speakers, bless the moderators, bless everyone on this call. Give them strength, give them peace, and give them the power they can and that they need to continue to advance your kingdom and all that is holy and righteous through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Tim. Now, please let me introduce to you Ms. Jennifer King Congleton, who was elected the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director in 2018. Upon her election, she has promised to do a new thing. Yes, a new thing. Since that time, she has established several new initiatives, such as the Mid-Atlantic Region Leadership Institute, the Undergraduate Symposium, and the First Regional Spiritual Care Team. Jennifer King Congleton has a sincere passion for Alpha Kappa Alpha, and that has helped her to sustain and maintain a lively sisterhood throughout the region, even during this pandemic. Our very own Mid-Atlantic Regional Director, who has done a new thing, yes, a new thing for the marvelous Mid-Atlantic region. I present to you Miss Jennifer King Congleton.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor of the City of Petersburg, Annette Smith Lee. And hello, Virginia. Good evening to you. On behalf of the 10,000 plus members of the Mid-Atlantic region of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and that is the state of North Carolina and the Commonwealth of Virginia, I say to you, welcome to tonight's town hall, an important collaboration with the Virginia Association of Chapters of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, our brothers. Thank you. AKA's lead is Alpha Kappa Alpha's political engagement initiative. Learn, empower, advocate, decide. Let me say that again. Lead, learn, empower, advocate, decide. As our country, now think about this, as our country moves forward with a new administration, and I am so grateful to that, a new administration in Washington, D.C., the Alpha Kappa Alpha family is committed to ensuring that our local communities stay politically engaged and informed. Tonight's theme, from chaos to community, where do we go from here, is very fitting for this year, and we are extremely, extremely pleased. Social and racial injustice, COVID-19, skyrocketing unemployment have all weighed heavily on our communities. But each of us can play a part in the healing that must take place to move us forward with hope, a resolve to effect change, and the determination to get into good trouble, into good trouble. It has been an exciting week for our country and for Alpha Kappa Alpha. Of course, we are immensely proud that the first woman, Vice President Kamala Harris, is an Alpha Kappa Alpha woman. Being first is something that we do not take lightly, and being first is something that we are familiar with. For 113 years, our sorority has been dedicated to service that includes providing programs such as this one to help the citizens gain insight into the issues that affect them, their families, and generations to come. Thank you all again for joining us, and thank you to Alpha Phi Alpha for continuing this important partnership. And I can't stop until I say a special thank you to Annette Smith Lee and Valerie Borkin for leading on our side, Tim Brown and Carlos Clanton for leading on our brother's side, Alpha Phi Alpha, and definitely a special thank you to District Director Fred Scott. We appreciate everything that you've done, and the tech team from Zeta Epsilon Omega Chapter in Suffolk, Virginia of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and Allison Baker, our communications chair with Alpha Kappa Alpha Mid-Atlantic region. Thank you so much. Enjoy the evening and learn much. God bless you.
Wow. That's hard to follow up on. So I'm going to be brief as I introduce our regional director. Now, Mr. Fred Scott. He's a Richmond native, a Hampton alum, retired educator. He's a consultant. He's our current regional director and VACAPAF president. I can go on and on about all the accolades and his bio is extensive, but I'm not. I'm going to leave that to him to introduce how he desires. But I wanted to hit his high points. Brother Scott asked me to be the CPA chair, and I jumped at the idea based on a conversation we had on the way to a convention. I enjoyed it, and I am grateful that he gave me this opportunity to work with our sisters of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and it's been enlightening and it's been great. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to some and present to others Mr. Fred Scott.
Well, thank you, Brother Brown. I didn't expect to get that kind of a greeting. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We thank you for this opportunity to collaborate with our sisters. And I want to say, first of all, servants of all, We shall transcend all. And today, I'd like to thank the brothers of the Virginia Association of Chapters of Alpha Phi Alpha for being a part of this, as well as brothers from all over who have come in. I'm excited for the fact that we got 700 people who have registered, who will be participating in our first Pham town hall. To our sisters of Alpha Kappa Alpha, we love you. What else can I say? We love you. And I've loved my sisters from AKAs, from the days of Hampton University, Gamma Theta. Just want to say to you ladies out there, love you to death. And all of our AKAs. Jennifer, you're the best regional director out there. And my heart is just proud to be standing beside you. Our organization of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, we believe in advocating for our communities. It's part of our mission statement. It's something that has always been there. We have been doing that with our famous brothers from all time. Many of you know Dr. Martin Luther King, who's the eminent civil rights leader who led the Civil Rights March. But we've had so many brothers who've led that same march and continuing to do so. And we continue to pair up and we hook up as well as we make a difference. But I want to say this. In this town hall, I hope we are asking questions about justice reform, a support for our businesses. And what's close and near and dear to my heart is education. Education and the disparity of our youth, because we do not want to be left behind. And we want all of our children to have the same opportunities as every child as we move forward. So why is this event important? So I kind of wrote down a couple of things, but I wanted to say this. This is our opportunity to collectively join together with our sisters and all of our communities across the state and many of our political leaders and other people to say, here we are. Our voices need to be heard because we're advocating for our communities. To our local and state leaders that's making political policies and decisions based on their communities, we are here on behalf of our communities. So where do we go from here? From chaos to the community, here's what I got to say. We start here. We start here with this opportunity, with this town hall for us to get the voices out. And remember, brothers, and remember, sisters, we are in an organization that's representing the heart of our organization. I'd like to thank Tim Brown for his hard work. For when I turned this over to him, he said, yes, Brother Scott. And thank you, Carlos Connington, for stepping in to doing all the wonderful work behind the scene. In our district this year, our theme is Together We Will Enhance, Unite, and Reform. Thank you for this opportunity, and it's great to see everyone.
Thank you, Brother Scott. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, our moderators for today is Ms. Tracy DeSazier, a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, who is the Deputy Secretary for the Commonwealth of Virginia, appointed by Governor Ralph Northern. Also, we have Brent Solomon, a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, is a news reporter and an anchor for NBC 12 News in Richmond, Virginia. Here are our moderators.
All right. How are we doing?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Wonderful.
Tracy, I'm so excited to be here. I don't know about you, but this is just an awesome opportunity for people to get the knowledge they need and to be informed from the experts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, first off, I'm very excited to moderate with you this evening and really want to set the tone by first inviting people to join in the conversation tonight. We want you to place your comments and your questions in the chat box on whatever platform you're using today to view this stream. We're also going to periodically share questions throughout tonight's discussion and later on during the Q&A portion of the program.
If we were not in COVID times and if we were in a huge auditorium right now, I'd say, look at your neighbor and say, I'm glad to be here. But ladies and gentlemen, we're not in those times. We're in different times. So do me a favor. Everybody has a comment section on the side of your screen. Go ahead and type in there, "I'm glad to be here." This is how we kind of makeshift to this new time that we're in. And I do believe, Tracy, don't you, that we'll be back to normal soon. We'll be together again soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But like Brent said, just comment in that chat feature. We want you to let us know that you're here this evening. And we also invite you to follow us on social media. So you can follow us at VA Phirst Pham. And don't forget to use that hashtag tonight. Remember, that's hashtag VA Phirst Pham.
Very quickly, I want to give a shout out to Gina Winston, shout out to Kiana Williams, and a shout out to so many other people, because now all of you are literally typing, "I'm glad to be here." Exum Lee the third, Wendy Dixon. I can't say everybody's names, but you see it there in the comments. And guys, that's how we're going to stay involved. That's how we stay connected through tonight, through that comment section. Lastly, if you have a question, if something that you hear resonates with you from one of the speakers or experts, or maybe you say, "Hey, I don't understand. What does that mean? What do you mean that cases in Virginia are rising dramatically? What can I do? How can I do my part?" Just type it in the comment section.
Absolutely. Well, Brent, I think now is a good time for us to maybe go ahead and get jumped in. So I know tonight we're going to focus tonight's conversation on two different very important topics. And so we're going to be talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. We are joined by some dynamic representatives from Governor Northam's administration. And then we're going to transition and we're going to talk about criminal justice reform. And so I think we're going to go ahead and kick things off by starting the conversation with a conversation on COVID-19.
All right, let's waste no time. Dr. Vanessa Walker-Harris is the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services. Why don't we begin with Dr. Walker-Harris?
Good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. As you noted, I'm the Deputy Secretary in Health and Human Resources for Virginia, and that means I provide support to the Virginia Department of Health, Virginia State Medicaid, and the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And the approach for our administration to responding to COVID has been a whole of government response and a whole of community response. And so first, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are watching and participating for all of the hard work that you're doing by wearing your mask, staying physically distant, washing your hands in order to keep us all safe as we try to tamp down and stamp out COVID. So I wanted just to provide a brief update on our response, including our vaccine efforts. Most folks are aware that there are particular segments of our community that are harder hit as far as COVID cases and hospitalizations, and our Black and Latino and Indigenous communities are among those who are disproportionately impacted. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to the COVID vaccine, we've been working really hard along with our community partners through the Vaccine Advisory Work Group and the Health Equity Work Group and leadership team to make sure that all of our community members.
All right. Do we have technology affecting us, Tracy? It seems like it might be the case.
It looks like we do. It looks like we do, but that's okay. What we can do is we can go ahead and bring in our next speaker, and hopefully we can go back to Vanessa momentarily. So I know we're also joined by Marvin Figueroa, who also serves as the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Resources. And so Marvin, if you can jump in and maybe pick up where Vanessa left off and tell us a little bit about your role in the response.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be with you all today. At 8-5 to the Bruz. Where kind of Vanessa was talking about is that our response is focused on kind of center and equity, because we know that from both the evidence that we have now, but also going into the emergency, we had a sense that it was going to happen, is that this is disproportionately impacting particular segments of the population, right? So African Americans, Latino communities, and also Indigenous communities. And so in our response, down from how we do testing to how we are distributing the vaccines, we're ensuring that those populations are the ones that we are focused on the most. Because when the virus hits those communities, you see a higher level of mortality. Surprise that the rollout has been bumpy. It has had its challenges. We are looking at this new administration as a fresh opportunity for us to press reset. But nonetheless, we have vaccines that are going into the field. We are vaccinating not only our individuals who live in long-term care facilities and healthcare personnel, but we have expanded to vaccinate individuals who are 65 and older, have underlying conditions that put them at greater risk of serious injury or death, and also individuals that work in occupations that brings them a higher exposure of the virus. And so it's been, our first case in Virginia was in March 7th of 2020. Since then, we've been working nonstop to ensure that our response meets the challenge.
Very good. Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Figueroa. Let's go ahead and get back to Dr. Walker Harris, who also joins us now. Dr. Harris.
Thank you. So just picking up where Marvin left off, there are great opportunities for each of you to continue to stay engaged. The Virginia Department of Health, in partnership with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Governor's Office, has established an ambassador program. And so you're welcome to check out that opportunity at our website, vdh.virginia.gov. And what we mean by ambassador are really community members just like you who are attending these types of events and learning more about our COVID response, and then able to encourage and educate your friends and family, particularly about the vaccine. We know that for historical reasons, the medical community has lost trust among Black and Latinx and Indigenous populations. And so it's folks like you who can serve as ambassadors to increase the confidence that your church members, your own children and family members, your coworkers have in going to get a vaccine. I know that most folks have heard of herd immunity. And so that means we need to get a good amount of our population vaccinated so that we'll all be safe from COVID and really able to stamp out this pandemic. And so again, really encourage folks to visit vdh.virginia.gov to learn more about how to become a community ambassador. And then lastly, just wanted to share, as Marvin noted, we've really been working across all agencies to provide resources to the community. We know that it's not just a health issue, but the COVID pandemic has impacted your housing, your transportation, your employment, your school. And so across agencies, we've been working to make sure that healthcare is accessible by increasing flexibilities, that we have a workforce. So healthcare workers and physicians, they've gotten some flexibilities to come out of retirement and serve, or extensions on when they would normally have to take licensing tests. And then we know that being in quarantine, existing in a pandemic state for nearly a year now takes a toll. And so we've been mindful about the mental health aspect of this and increasing resources into our community, especially to address the fact that there have been more instances of substance use disorder and requests for treatment, increases in suicide and increases in overdose. And so we're working to be responsive to each of those. And our Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services developed a line that folks can call in and get support that's called VACAPAF, COPES, and the number is 877-349-6428, and it's staffed even through the weekend. And there are counselors who are trained who can talk through with you if you're just stressed because of your housing situation, or your kids are virtual learning, and that can be stressful. There are people and resources there to support us through this time.
Great points from both of you. And you're so right when you say COVID is not just the condition itself. It's really a trigger down effect on so many aspects of our lives. Let me ask you a question, and either of you can chime in. With the vaccine already in distribution, what would you say to those communities who might be a little bit concerned, a little worried, a little hesitant on whether or not they should take it? What would be your message to them?
I'm happy to respond. So I would say, your concern is understandable, and would encourage folks to connect with a trusted source of information, whether or not that's the VDH website. They've got a great website on the COVID vaccine, or the CDC, or your primary care physician who can talk through with you the risk benefits and make sure that the vaccine is for you. We are very confident, having reviewed the research and the evidence, that these are safe vaccines. And, I'm looking forward to getting it, and my family members as well. And I've encouraged them to do so. And so really would encourage you to talk about your concerns with your trusted sources of information, including your primary care doctor.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Vanessa. I was going to jump in really quickly, Brennan. I want to ask a question to Marvin before we conclude this segment. And that question is around just sticking with the vaccine. So we know that you all have shared some great resources tonight. You directed us to the VDH website, and we appreciate that. But really want to know, if I am interested in getting information around the vaccine from my family members, where do I direct them to go? How do they know when it's their turn to get the vaccine? What is the best way to get that information?
Thank you for that question, Toro. In the VDH website, there's information about eligibility, what phase your local health district may be in, and then there's also a tool where you can input answer 3 or 4 questions, and it will tell you whether or not it is appropriate for you to seek out the vaccine at the moment, given the limited availability. In the coming weeks, we will also start adding other components to our website, which will allow you to directly schedule an appointment to be able to get the vaccine. And so this is a ever evolving virus, and we're hoping that production will pick up as early as possible, but we're working with what we have right now to ensure that Virginians are safe. And again, like Dr. Walker Harris mentioned, in the meantime, please do continue to remain socially distanced, to wear your mask, wash your hands often, because the virus is still with us.
We got an alert from NBC 12. If you get their alerts, it says, up to date, 416,000 people in Virginia have now been vaccinated. So, of course, that number will continue to grow. In 1 minute or less, if either one of you can answer this question that we have that just came in the chat, it said, how long is the vaccine effective, and when do you anticipate it being widespread for the general public to receive?
I'll take the second part
Sure.
if you take the first part, Vanessa.
Happy to work together, Marvin. So from the studies that have been done to date, we know that the immunity you get from the vaccine is effective for about 90 days, but those clinical trials that led to the release of the vaccines are still underway. So we'll learn more and more day by day about how long the vaccine protects us.
Great. And in terms of widespread availability, is a tough question to answer in large part because it is manufacturer dependent. We are looking to make progress and looking at the summer as a benchmark. I will say this is like my final day as Deputy Secretary. I'll be starting with the Biden administration tomorrow. So hopefully next time I'm in one of these forums, I'll have a better answer for you.
Congratulations on that appointment. Thank you so much, Dr. Walker Harris and Dr. Figueroa. We appreciate you. And since we can't give you a round of applause, everyone's going to write in the comments right now, thank you, with an exclamation mark. We appreciate you and your expertise.
We also invite you all to stay with us. We understand that, our time is limited this evening, but if you all want to stay around and maybe address some of those questions in the chat, we would certainly appreciate it. We also ask that those resources that you all provided us with, if you all could take a moment to drop those in the chat as well to ensure that we don't lose that great information that you all shared.
And if you don't see all the love, just look in the comment section. So many people telling you thank you. And Dr. Figueroa, congratulations.
Thank you.
Tracy, we've got much more. We've even got some lawmakers up in the chat room tonight.
We do, and we're excited to hear from them. I think the first person we're going to hear from is actually Delegate Lamont Bagby, and so we want to go ahead and welcome him to the stage this evening. We know that Delegate Bagby is actually the chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. Delegate Bagby, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to see you both. Good to see you both, and thanks for the invitation. We are right in the middle of session with a lot to do, and I know a number of my colleagues are going to follow me. But we're really excited about all the things that we have an opportunity to address during this session, including how we address COVID-19 and not criminal justice reform, because not everyone going through the justice system is a criminal, so justice reform.
Absolutely. We look forward to the work ahead that you're doing. Thank you so much for being here, my friend. Senator Jennifer McClellan is with us. Senator.
Hello. Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you, coming in from my daughter Samantha's room. And, we did a lot of amazing work during the 2020 General Assembly session a year ago, but we didn't really have a chance to celebrate our successes because 5 minutes after we adjourned, the governor declared a state of emergency, and we went immediately into constituent crisis relief mode. But wanted to talk about some of the bills that we did pass a year ago, and one that I want to highlight deals with expanding parole. When Virginia abolished parole back in the 90s, the whole idea behind abolishing parole was we need to move towards truth in sentencing. And I, even though I was a college student at the time, I did not agree with abolishing parole, but I did agree that we needed truth in sentencing. Here's the problem with that. Juries were not informed that parole was no longer an option. So you had juries who were sentencing people thinking the old system was in place. So for example, if they thought, well, we think that this person should serve a 10-year sentence, we're going to sentence them to 15 or 20 with the idea they'll be eligible for parole in 10 years. But that wasn't an option and they weren't told. So the Supreme Court, in a case called Phirst versus the Commonwealth back in 2000, said that juries should have been informed that parole was no longer an option. So going forward from that case in 2000, juries were informed, but you had a lot of people who had been sentenced and incarcerated under in that window period who were just stuck. And so for many years, we put bills in, and finally in 2020, we passed, and it took effect on July 1st. All of those, what we call fishback defendants who were sentenced after parole was abolished, but their juries weren't told, are now all eligible for parole. And the parole board has to address their cases by July 1st of this year, unless they get an extension for reasonable cause. So, justice delayed is justice denied, but fortunately, 20 years later, 20 years after the Supreme Court said we denied those defendants due process, they are now going to be eligible for parole. So very proud that we were able to get that bill passed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for providing that overview of that bill. And I believe that's SB 793. Senator McClellan, correct us if we're wrong on that, but we know that information, that piece of legislation in particular is particularly meaningful because a number of those individuals that fell into that window received incredibly egregious sentences. And so thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
Tracy, you won't soon forget, and not many people in the community, because so many people watched this happen and they were left a little stunned. I believe it was on a highway not far from Henrico and the Richmond line. A young man involved in an unfortunate situation with police. That young man was shot and killed. That young man was also naked at the time. A lot of people would say, how on earth would a naked man pose a threat to police, right? That was the conversation. Why did police feel the need to shoot and kill him? And so it was in the news. There were rallies, there were protests. In the end, authorities finding that the officer was justified, but whether or not if you agree with the outcome of that, there is some good that many people are finding with the outcome. And that outcome is called the Marcus Alert, and it relates to mental health. To talk more about that, as well as some of the other upcoming legislation that our state leaders are working on, let's welcome my frat brother, Delegate Jeff Bourne. Delegate Bourne.
First of all, I just want to thank the Phirst fam for having this great discussion about all the important things going on. As our wonderful moderator alluded to, I'm a member of the oldest and coldest and boldest fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. Having said that, Brent, thank you so much for that lead up into the Marcus Alert, which I think was one of the most monumental things we did in a special session. And really what we want to do is continue chipping away at this notion that has gripped and plagued Virginia and America for too long, which is the criminalization of mental health issues. For far too long, we have locked up and incarcerated people who simply have mental health issues that need to be treated rather than penalized. And so with the implementation of the Marcus Alert, we're going to have co-response teams. We're going to have mental health professionals there on site first, so that the folks can get the actual treatment they need rather than handcuffs and a ride in a patrol car. As both Delegate Bagby and Senator McClellan have said, we did a lot in 2020. We did a lot in a special session, but as much as we did, we all know that there is so much more work to be done. And so, as I've heard Delegate Bagby say on a couple of these Zooms earlier this week, a lot of folks expected us to take it easy or shift to neutral after all the work we did in 2020. But actually, we're not going to do that. We downshifted and we're going to hit the gas and we're going to keep going forward. We've got bills to address all the issues that affect Virginia, everything from energy to justice reform to making sure that we continue to provide the support and resources from a healthcare and housing perspective to all the Virginians who so desperately need them. And in particular, for me, I continue to focus on housing, continue to focus on mental health, and just a couple of highlights. We're going to try and create what we tried to create. It unfortunately died earlier this week, but a state version of the low-income housing tax credit. And this week we'll talk about whether or not I believe it's appropriate and right to allow the evidence of a mental health or an intellectual or developmental disability to be offered in a criminal trials as evidence. And I know Senator McClellan has a version in the Senate, but we're going to continue to chip away at these issues, and I'll stop there and just answer any questions that might come up in the chat or through the discussion here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Delegate Bourne.
Excellent.
I don't see any questions just yet. Do you, Tracy?
No, I don't see any just yet, but we do ask if you all have a little bit of time, if you can stick around with us. We're going to continue to hear from a number of your colleagues about just the incredible work that you all have done over the past several months here. I know that we're joined by Delegate Dolores McQuinn, and we're going to ask you to speak to HB 5029. And the reason we want to focus on that particular piece of legislation is because the entire nation, and really the entire world, watched last summer as we saw George Floyd's life literally leave his body. We were appalled that we didn't see the officers standing around really step in and intervene. And so if you could speak to the legislation that you introduced and that we successfully passed, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening. And thank you very much, Tracy. And to my colleagues, good evening to you. Thank you, Tracy, you all for inviting me and asking me to be a part of this. And you're right. The truth about it, there's been a long history of law enforcement use of force in Black communities and communities of color. And this bill is a piece of legislation that was passed in the 2020 special session that really focused on accountability. It requires that any law enforcement officer who witnesses another law enforcement officer in the performance of their official duty, engaging or attempting to engage in excessive use against a person shall intervene. And how will they intervene? The intervention, as long as it's reasonable, must come through the letting someone else know, sharing that information with someone else, or intervening at that point and trying to stop it. It was such an egregious act against Mr. Floyd. But the bottom line, to see all of those other officers who surround Mr. Floyd, and no one felt compelled to step in as his life left his body, and the entire world had an opportunity to see it. And so this bill would say that there is a penalty, a Class 1 act, even to a Class 6 felony, for those who stand on the sideline and will watch something happen rather to intervene to change the dynamic of that particular time.
Wow. So in that case, what we're really seeing, Delegate, is a national situation that has impacted the world, now showing some change, some might say positive change on a local level in Virginia.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, Mr. Floyd has lost his life. There have been many others in the past, but we want to bring a stop to this. We want to do something that's going to be constructive to help create the paradigm shift. And, the worst thing that could happen is for Mr. Floyd to lose his life and his life be lost in vain. I'm saying that this bill will help to change that.
Thank you so much. So glad to have you here with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Brent.
All right, Tracy, we're moving right along, aren't we?
We are. I think we have, who do we have with us now? I think maybe Delegate Aird is going to join us.
Is Delegate Aird? Yep, look at her photo there. Delegate Aird, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. It's my absolute pleasure.
Go ahead and update us on your topic and what we should know, because we have a huge audience waiting to hear just from you. You're up.
Oh, sure. Great. I thought that, for this conversation, as you've been focused on criminal justice reform, I just want to remind your audience of how exciting it is to have been the patron during the special session this past fall of what is namely referred to as Breonna's Law. I think that there is probably not a single person in the Commonwealth, or quite frankly around our country, who didn't hear about the unspeakable tragedy, unfortunately, of Breonna Taylor. And now in the Commonwealth, we have the ability to say that we have led the way, because we will become the first state to have passed this law, which is the prohibition of the use of the no-knock search warrants in the name of Breonna Taylor. There were 2 other states to have this existing law, but really we are the first to do so, to make sure that the value, the memory, and just how much we care about Breonna Taylor's life is forever remembered. And, the thing I want people to know about this is not only in the Commonwealth that we accomplished fully prohibiting the use of the no-knock search warrant. And I just want to emphasize that, because as other states are trying to also get this done, it's very difficult, as I have looked, to get that full prohibition. But no matter what the circumstance, short of exigent circumstances, no law enforcement officer can merely just enter your home with just the form of a no-knock search warrant. It's just not allowed. But in addition to that, we were able to also make sure that if law enforcement is serving a warrant, that they do so during daylight hours, that they do so in uniform, that they do so in a way that's audibly able to be heard by the individuals within a residence, and that also when they are serving a warrant, that they verbalize what that warrant allows them to do, that they read it to you or leave it affixed to that property. And I think what's also most critical about what we were able to accomplish is the fact that should those steps not be followed, should any of that not be done, anything they obtain will be inadmissible in a court of law. So we're talking about really trying to put people first in the process of executing search warrants. And quite frankly, if it were not for the advocates and for, my colleagues and everyone rallying around the fact that we want to be in a Commonwealth where this becomes the norm, we would not have been able to accomplish this.
Delegate Aird, I think so many people will thank you for the work on that effort, because we all know the 3 words that led the nation in protest when it came to Breonna Taylor. And if you know what I'm talking about, go ahead and write it in the comments. 3 words leading the protest chants all around the country when it came to Breonna Taylor. I'm looking for the first person to write it in the comments. Hint, the first word is say. All right, Marie KM, you just won a virtual $500. Virtual.
See, Brenda's pulling you all's leg this evening, but we do appreciate that that engagement. And Delegate Aird, thank you for the work. And I would say thank you for including the nuance that you included in that piece of legislation, right? It's not enough just to have that legislation, but to ensure that those additional components were there, that individuals have to be actually in identifiable clothing so that you can see that they're law enforcement, that they actually have to come during the daytime as well. And so that nuance really matters. And so we appreciate that. Now I know we are joined by Delegate Sia Price. And Delegate Price, we're excited to hear from you because the legislation that you introduced and which ultimately passed, this is HB 5104. We want you to speak to this because there's been a lot of conversation around hiring practices. And we've heard a lot of rumors and tales of law enforcement officers perhaps not having the best conduct in one jurisdiction and then going to another jurisdiction. So can you speak to that piece of legislation and your work in this space?
Yes, thank you. And good evening, Tracy and Brent, and to my sisters of Alpha, Kappa Alpha, Sorority Incorporated, and to the Ice Cold Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and all who are watching tonight. I am going to go off script just for a little bit and just say that the theme of From Chaos to Community is so fitting right now, as we are literally watching chaos on our televisions and on our devices. And so this is an important and timely event. But I also want to encourage you, as you're deciding your individual and collective roles of how to move forward, how do we figure out where to go from here, that you understand that this legislative session that we are having right now is the most accessible that we've ever had. So you can follow along, you can do written public comment, you can also give live testimony, all from home or work or whatever your device of choice is. And so I'll drop some links in the comments for how to help you do that. But as for the question I was asked, one of the issues that we did tackle within the police reform was how police departments get to talk to each other. And so most people probably assumed that this was already happening, but there were significant limits on what departments could say to each other. Say if someone left a police department in Hampton and wanted to even go right across the street to Newport News, there were glaring omissions in what the police chiefs could discuss to see if that officer was a right fit for the community. For example, if an officer was fired for the excessive use of force, but it did not rise to the level of a crime, that could not be included. If the officer was fired for sexist, racist, homophobic, xenophobic behavior, but it did not rise to the level of a crime, that could not be discussed. So if you're in retail, your prospective new job can call your previous job and have a whole conversation about you, much like other jobs. So it was really important that we allowed for these police chiefs to be able to have those conversations. So House Bill 5104 would allow for a psychological exam to be required alongside the physical exam, but it also mandates that these communications happen between the previous law enforcement agency and the prospective new one. And so it's a part of the larger package of bills, and we understand that legislation can't fix everything, but it was an important addition to the conversation as we're raising the standards, the minimum standards, as we are increasing accountability. We also need to make sure that this communication can happen. So we got a lot done. It is far from over, but I appreciated being able to work with my colleagues on continuing to tear down injustices as we're building up our communities. And I think the most important part of it for us from the summer is to carry that same energy into this session and not just say that Black Lives Matter, but make sure that Virginia code reflects that Black Lives Matter. And so that was important when I was working on House Bill 5104.
Delegate Price, very well said. Keep that same energy, right? Even next year, keep it going. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. I want to reiterate our theme for this evening, and it is from chaos to community. And Delegate Price so clearly emphasized that. I looked up Merriam Dictionary defining chaos as a state of utter confusion. Ladies and gentlemen, we're working our way out of chaos, and we do it by being one, by being a community, by being one whole. Your involvement here tonight is a step towards that direction. All of our lawmakers here today, as you already hear, are doing their part to eliminate that chaos, right? Get things on track the way they should be. And so for your work and for your service, lawmakers, I don't think you hear it enough. Thank you for what you're doing and for listening to your constituents and what's happening on the national stage. We appreciate that. All right. Let's move right along, Tracy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think we're joined by, Delegate Don Scott may be with us as well. Mm-hmm. And Delegate Scott, I mean, you have just done a tremendous work, certainly before you became a legislator, and you just continue to do great work now that you are serving in the office that you're serving in. There's been a lot said about earned sentence credits. Can you speak with us about early release and the work that you did to ensure that those earned sentence credits are actually recognized?
Thank you all for having me. I'm Delegate Don Scott, representing House District 80 in Portsmouth. I'm also a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And I just want to say hello to all of the sorors and all of the Divine Nine that might be watching this evening. Want to thank you for that. Yeah, a lot of my work, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I do a lot of work in that space mainly. And, one of the things that I saw were a lot of folks who were getting denied the opportunity for second chances. And in Virginia, we had the bill that I introduced was House Bill 5148, which increased the amount of earned sentence credits that folks could earn. Right now, people earn 4.5 days per 30 days for being what they call the model prisoner. And so what we did was we were able to add a lot more folks to that formula, and we were able to change it from 4.5 days for every 30 days to 15 days for every 30 days for those people who were model prisoners, which was a level 1. And a level 2, they'd get 7.5 days. And level 3, they would get 3.5 days. And a level 4, they'd still get no days. That bill ended up impacting over 12,000 people who are serving time. It takes effect not 2022, which pushes it back because folks want to have time to implement new computer systems, new software systems. But it's part of my effort to decarcerate in the impact of mass incarceration on brown and black families in Virginia. We make up 19% of Virginia's population, yet we make up 55% of Virginia's population. So that's one of the issues that we have to focus on. The theme is chaos to community. Important that we remember that. And he also said, where do we go from here? And I think Dr. King, that was the very last book that he wrote before he was assassinated. And so, I always think it's very helpful when you ask that question. You just can't say chaos to our community. You also have to answer the question, where do we go from here? And I think right now, we've seen there are some communities, we know exactly where they want us to go. That they don't want to go forward. And we know that there are some communities like ours, and we're all responsible for fighting for how we go forward. And I think until we answer that question collectively, where do we go from here, we're going to continue to repeat 1968, 1970, 1980. And that's why we're here right now. But I think right now we are in a position as a community, as the Virginia Black Caucus led by our chair, fantastic job. We are holding folks accountable. And I know Ms. DeShazier works with the governor's office. I say what y'all want to. This is the blackest governor we ever had in Virginia. All right. As far as policies go. All right. Don't tell him I said that. But you think about the things, and he got put in, history has served him well. He got placed in a position where he was able to do some things, and he could have shrunk from those responsibilities, but he did not. He could have shrank from those responsibilities to the plate, and you got to give him credit. He has tackled a lot of issues that we have been fighting for forever, and he's done so enthusiastically. And I think we're going to do a lot more as we move forward here over the next session. Thank y'all for having me, and I appreciate you.
All right, Delegate Scott, we appreciate you. My friends, so if you heard something this evening from anyone that has spoken, now is your time to get a little more clarity on those topics. The chat section is now open. We want to begin our question and answer segment. And Tracy, one question I saw, we'll let Delegate Bourne go ahead and begin. One person said, well, what exactly do you mean by we're addressing mental health when we talk about the Marcus alert? Delegate Bourne, can you just give us a little more clarity for people who are wondering exactly how that might work?
Sure. So I think it's a little bit larger of an answer than just a Marcus alert, because for several years now, the legislature has committed more resources, more funding, more supports for the mental health issue and mental health space. And what really crystallized it for a lot of people and made it front and center was the unfortunate circumstances and situation that one of our colleagues in the Senate, Senator Creed Deeds, found himself in. And so they created what's called the Deeds Commission. I believe Delegate Price serves on the commission. And so she's obviously more well-versed on what the Deeds Commission has done and will be doing. But mental health has been an issue that is not new. But what's unfortunate for many of the folks that look like you and I is that mental health issues and diagnosis and treatment are very taboo in our communities. And we're trying to break down those stigmas. But for specifically about Marcus Alert, what we want to do is make sure that we're getting mental health professionals to address and respond to those incidents that would otherwise be handled by police. So, for example, you walk down a street, you go to a 7-Eleven, you stop at a stoplight, and there's someone who clearly is in the throes of a mental health crisis or needs some support, maybe some people call 911 and say, hey, there's a scary looking woman, there's a scary looking man, perhaps talking to themselves, sort of being aggressive with customers, not physically, but just talking. And what would normally happen is the police would come out and they might arrest a person for trespassing, put them in the back of the cruiser, take them to jail. Well, under the Marcus Alert, what we're going to do is set up a system whereby instead of that police officer showing up, we're going to have mental health counselors, peer recovery specialists, the people who can actually intervene, interdict, and assess that situation and get them into a place where they can get help, not where they can get 3 hots and a cot in the Richmond City Jail, because that's not helping them. It's not helping us. It's not helping them. And so that's really what it's about, is getting the folks who need the mental health supports, the addiction supports, the help that they need, and not another interface with the criminal justice system.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Delegate Bourne. You all have all done tremendous work. And just to ensure our audience is clear, what we did was we asked our legislators to speak to legislation that was introduced and ultimately passed during the 2020 regular session, as well as the 2020 special session. We are now in 2021, and yet another legislative session has started. And so, Delegate Bagby, I want to jump back over to you as the chair of the Virginia Legislative Bloc Caucus. You all recently unveiled your 2020 legislative priorities. If you can speak to some of the criminal justice reform priorities in the bill and some of the work that's in front of you all.
Well, there's a number of them, and the 2020 session was really good to us, and we worked hard for it. But I think when we left the chamber, we knew that if there was one space that we could say that we had the most opportunity, and this was before COVID and before the unrest, we knew it was criminal justice reform. And I gotta tell you, people like Don Scott, Jeff Bourne, Jennifer McClellan have led the way. And so I would think they would be better to talk about that.
Wonderful. Senator McClellan, if you're still there, we would love to hear from you. Or wonderful.
I apologize. My internet keeps going in and out, which I guess is.
We hear you. We hear your voice.
Keeps going in and out, so I'm going to defer to Jeff.
Remind me of the question. What's the question? General topic.
So we would love for you to talk about just some of your priorities for this current session that you're in. And of course, our theme for tonight is criminal justice reform. And so what are your priorities and what are the things that our audience tonight needs to be aware of that you're focusing on?
Sure. So, and I'll just name one of them. I'm just going to talk about just as a subject area because Delegate Scott is leading the way. And that has to do with expungements, criminal record reform. But I think one of the biggest issues we're dealing with is how we legalize and reform our marijuana approach in Virginia. And so one of the biggest issues that we'll deal with is that. And for me, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but there are a couple key points that I'm going to have to see before I can really get behind a marijuana reform. And one, that's the automatic expungement of the records. Two, that's going to be how do we equitably provide and inject resources into the communities that have been hit hardest from the abject failure that was the war on drugs. Third, and perhaps the most complex and complicated, is how do we allow those same communities, including because I continue to hear that some folks believe that this segment of our population shouldn't be allowed to be a part of this, but how do we make sure that communities of color, the people that we represent, have the real opportunity to take part in and be a part of the economics of marijuana legalization and the market that's going to be created by this. And so there are some who would think that former felons shouldn't be allowed to start these businesses, but I mean, for me, that's a non-starter. I can't think of another business where just because you are formerly incarcerated, you can't start a business. So really, collectively as a Black Caucus, we are committed to making sure that when we do this, it's done equitably. One of the things that I talked about in my opening remarks was the introduction of evidence of a mental health illness or intellectual developmental disabilities in a criminal trial. That's a matter of fairness and equity, and it gets to what we all want from our criminal justice system, which is actual true justice. And so those are some of the things I know Delegate Scott spent a long night on Friday fighting hard for and against some bad criminal justice policies, but mostly for good ones. So I'll yield back the balance of my time to him.
Well, Delegate Scott, before you go, I want to ask you a question from one of our participants, and then feel free to add on anything else you'd like to on this topic. But Latrice Tollerson wrote this question. Are there any programs in place to find employment and to reintegrate parolees into the community? So once they get out early, what are we doing to make sure that they have work and that they're able to live a life that won't get them back in the slammer?
Right. Thank you for that question. So before I became a practicing attorney, I spent the last 14 years prior to that working in a workforce development company, a company that focused on helping the most vulnerable amongst us, those who are temporary assistance needy families, those who are on what they call the UPSET program, Food Stamp Employment and Training Program, those who are the workforce development programs. They call it WIO, Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. There are a lot of opportunities for folks who are reentering society to take advantage of some of these programs to go to work. The issue is, the biggest issue, the largest impediment to folks transitioning back in is that they do not have housing. And so I am working with some of these organizations locally to try to figure out a way to provide stable housing to folks. So when they do come back home, they will have the stability to get housing and then get employment and training. And one of the things that we have to start focusing on, which is where I'm focusing on too, we need to make sure that before folks leave, there is a program and a process in place before they ever get out of jail where they are trained, they have a skill, and if they don't have a skill, they have a connection to employment, either it's subsidized or not. That is what we are doing. We subsidize industries all the time. We can subsidize those folks who have proven that they're ready to come back to our community and be gainfully employed. We can connect them to employers and offer those employers incentives. And that's the next step in this program. We have some of those programs now already in place at the federal government, but we can do more. The next thing, talking about some of our criminal justice priorities, a large priority for me is to end the school to prison pipeline. I introduced a bill to stop what they call valid court orders, where you can detain juveniles for a violation of a valid court order. That happens when children who have committed no crime, and you'd be surprised at how many kids go to jail for committing no crime, which means they were truant, they skipped school, or they were runaway, or they were being prostituted in some instance. And what they do is they take those kids into juvenile court and juvenile domestic relations court, and then they say, they determine after assessing them and interviewing if they are children in need of services. There's a statute that says children in need of services, which means they need to be evaluated, either placed back in the home with counseling or sent to foster care or whatever. And what happens is, what we'll do is we'll say, for your own good, we need to lock you up with the other kids that really did something. So what happens when you get in that system? We already know what happens. You get inculcated and indoctrinated into the prison lifestyle. And then that begins that road down that thing. So we need to stop that now. Luckily, we were able to get that bill out of the House Criminal Subcommittee on Friday night that Delegate Bourne was talking about after some fussing and fighting. We got that bill out. Another bill that we got out is, people don't know this, but if you have loved ones who have ever been incarcerated, you can be on probation for life for a 5-year sentence. So let's say you got sentenced to a 5-year sentence and the judge suspended 4 years. And during that time frame, you got technically violated, which means you didn't comply with some non-criminal aspect of your probation, means get a job or don't get a dirty urine or whatever. And the next thing you know, the probation officer violates you. You go to court, the judge violates you, revokes your original 5 years. Let's say it was in year 4. You're in year 4. In the 5th year, the judge revokes your sentence, reinstates the entire 5 years, sends you back to jail for a limited amount of time, and then when you get back out, you back on probation for that suspended amount of time right now. I have a client who was in jail. I wasn't his lawyer back then, y'all. Let's get that straight. But I'm his lawyer now. He went to jail in 2000 for a marijuana charge. What we're talking about, possession with intent to distribute marijuana in 2000. He got 10 years with 9 years suspended. His probation was revoked. The judge reinstated it. It was revoked again, and the judge reinstated it. And now he's doing time here in 2021 on a charge that was 20 years ago. Think about that. You never get off. You're always tethered to this system because this system feeds on brown and black bodies to survive. And once we understand that is their sustenance, that's how they feed, then we do the things that we need to do to limit that. So that's just one of many. I can go on and on about criminal justice stuff because we got so much we need to do and so much that we're working on. Delegate Bourne talked about the medical marijuana thing. It's hypocritical to not allow we have a pharmaceutical company less than 5 miles from me right now. I went and toured the place. It's weed everywhere, y'all. I'm in a 5-story building. There's more weed in that building in Portsmouth down the street where they're about to make money selling it. It's a medical marijuana facility called Columbia Care. There's more weed in that building than I ever seen in my life. I was looking over my shoulder. I was doing a tour thinking the feds was coming to get everybody. But it was weed, it was legal, and now they about to start selling this stuff. And our families, our community, our people will not be the beneficiaries of that. That is wrong. It's hypocritical. And to say that folks who have committed a felony for possession with intent to distribute marijuana should not be able to participate and should continue to have a criminal record after that. Their record should be wiped clean. Their sentences should be commuted. They should be released on the day this bill becomes legal so they can come home and participate in the free market that they were already in, that they said was illegal at the time. And I'm done.
So I want to add one other thing that we have. Virginia has the opportunity to be the first Southern state to abolish the death penalty, which we know is not a deterrent, which we know is disproportionately impacting Black and brown individuals who are more likely to be put to death than a white person who commits the exact same crime. That bill did get out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It was referred to the Finance Committee. It's expected to come out of there this week and be on the Senate floor. So we are about to make history here in Virginia, which has been one of the states that have put to death more people. As a matter of fact, the first person put to death in America was in Virginia, in Jamestown in 1608. So we have an opportunity to make history here this year with that. We also are moving forward to eliminate a lot of mandatory minimum sentences. They don't work. We need to put the discretion back in the hands of judges and juries to decide what sentences should be based on the particulars of a case. And we also, during special session, I'll just highlight, we made tremendous progress on jury sentencing reform. No longer will the decision on whether someone gets a jury sentence be left in the hands of the prosecutor. It will be in the defendant's hand where it should be. And then following up on the school to prison pipeline, we made progress this year on a bill that Delegate Bourne and I have been trying to get done for years, that we finally got done in 2020, eliminating the crime of disorderly conduct for behavior or incidents that happen at a school or school-sponsored event. This was a catch-all crime that was literally charging kids misdemeanors for things like a Henrico County student who sang a rap song on a bus, a Lynchburg student with autism who was sent to the principal's office and kicked a trash can on his way out, a student in Prince William who was entitled to free lunch, forgot his milk, went back to get the milk, was accused by a school resource officer of theft, and based on how the kid responded, he was charged both with attempting to steal the milk and with disorderly conduct because he was disrespectful. So we are making a lot of progress. We've got a long way still to go, though, and we're going to keep up the fight.
Senator, a great way that when you talk about we have a long way to go, that power is in the hands of the people, the hands of voters, the hands of everyone in this chat room. Delegate Price, can you give us some insight about when it comes to voting?
Yeah, so any of the issues that you might think about or are passionate about, I think the common denominator is the people's ability to vote in order to get representatives that will work on those issues. And so one of the things that the Black Caucus has known since our existence is that we have got to protect the right to vote for Black people. And we are expanding that fight as we move forward with Black, Indigenous, and people of color voters. And it is because we have seen that when we show up and we participate, we see backlash like we did on January 6th. And so that protection that so many seem to think, was back in the day or some civil rights movement of the past. Well, until those rights are truly guaranteed in practice, that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is still at risk. And so what we're also trying to do on the state level is pass the Voting Rights Act of Virginia that would bring a modified version of the federal level of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to the state level and protect us here for our state and local elections as well. And so we are looking forward to that, but we know it's an uphill battle. Senator McClellan and I are carrying that, but we're working with the national groups like Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, Advancement Project National Office, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the very folks that are on the front lines doing the litigating. And we're also working with New Virginia Majority, the folks that are on the doors talking to voters and hearing from the experiences about, the obstacles that folks have gotten through. So we did an amazing job with making it easier to vote in 2020, and we're hearing great responses back from how people love the early voting and the ease of voting. But if we are not also protecting the rights and making sure that the voting power of African American people is not diluted, then we are not truly talking about democracy. And our democracy is still young. We were not a true democracy here in the country until 1965, when people like you and me could vote, Brent. So I really want people to understand that a lot of folks watching were alive when that was signed. So we're not talking about our great-great-grandmother's battles. It continues and it's consistent. And if we don't continue to fight like they did, then we will find ourselves in very significant peril. And so I know that Alpha Phi Alpha has a voteless people as a hopeless people. And I know that AKA's vote is huge. And Senator McClellan is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. The Divine Nine knows this. And we've been fighting for this for hundreds of years. So now we just got to continue that fight here in 2021.
Absolutely. I think you said it all, Delegate Price. We certainly appreciate your work. And we just want to thank all of the members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus that joined us tonight. You all were incredibly gracious with your time. We know that there are a lot of demands on you all. And from a personal point of privilege, I just want to thank you for your partnership over the past several years as I've served in my professional capacity. It's no secret that my office oversees the restoration of civil rights processes on behalf of the governor, as well as clemency efforts. So anyone seeking a pardon or official forgiveness for any crime they may have committed. And so I mean it sincerely when I say thank you for your partnership in doing this work. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to transition a bit. And so we started the conversation with COVID. We transitioned over to criminal justice reform. We're going to transition back to COVID-19 just for a few more minutes. And what we want to do is bring Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Resources, Marvin Figueroa, back up. And we have a number of questions, but I want to jump in with the first one, and it's from Andaria Stewart. And the question is, Deputy Secretary Figueroa, first off, she wanted to say thank you for your service, but what role will you serve at in the White House? First off, congratulations on your appointment, but tell us a little bit more about your role. And I'm going to add a second component to that. In your role, how do you foresee the federal agency continuing to collaborate with the state?
Well, thank you for the congratulations, first off. So I will be the Director of Intergovernmental and External Affairs in the Office of the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And that's the office that is responsible with working with states, with mayors, with tribes, indigenous individuals, and with external groups on a number of different health and human services priorities. Right now, the priority is health and human, it is COVID-19 response. And so what we're hoping to do is we have 10 regional offices, and we're hoping to improve the relationship between the jurisdiction and how we respond to COVID-19. And so that's working with the CDC, that's working with FEMA, and that's working with the other federal agencies who are responsible for the response at the federal level, better collaborate with the states and the localities so that our response is coherent, more coherent. As you have seen in the course of this year, we have received federal, like, mixed signals from the federal government. My office is responsible for kind of setting the course for more alignment.
Dr. Figueroa, one of the comments earlier on said, when we're talking about the vaccine, let's say I decide to get it. I get the first one, and then, of course, I get the second, because you have to get 2 to be fully vaccinated. How long is that expected to last me? She went on to say, will it be like the flu shot, where it suggested you get it every year?
Well, I wish Dr. Walker Harris was here. I think there is still a process by which we don't fully understand whether or not they're going to have to be continuous vaccination. As we know, the virus is also mutating. The question is whether it mutates sufficient amount that we will have to get additional vaccines or a different strand of the vaccine. And so that is still being figured out. I think it also underscores a point that when it comes to COVID-19, while we know a significant amount, we are still learning more, especially as we progress in the emergency.
Yeah, in other words, this is brand new, guys. We haven't seen this in quite some time, something like this. And so we're learning as we go, really.
Yeah, I want to go back to some of the earlier comments and questions that we had, and a lot centered on, I think, some of the myths that we see in the Black community, right, and some of the fears that we see, and some of the misinformation that's circulating. And so we know that fear is coming from a rightful place, right? We can go through history and look at a number of times in which the government really used African American people, used Black people in experiment. And so can you speak to what are some of the ways in which we can work as organizations, as members of the Divine Nine, as citizens that are participating in this discussion tonight? How do we work to get out the facts, and how do we work against some of the misinformation that we're seeing?
Well, I think first and foremost is getting the right information out. I think what we know from the internet age is that misinformation travels very quickly. And it gets to places faster than the truth. And so we need to be able to combat that with accurate information. And everyone on this call, because you're in FIA or you're AKA or you're a Divine Nine, are leaders. And so people listen to us when we speak. And so I want to make sure that individuals join that ambassador program that Dr. Walker Harris talked about, that you've talked about, Deputy Secretary, and make sure that they talk to people about it. They internalize information, that they ask the questions necessary to fully understand what was given to them, and then help us get the truth out. Because in reality, the thing that's going to stand between us and normal life, or new normal, is getting that vaccine, is getting that herd immunity. And so standing on the sidelines, deciding not to take the vaccine, is detrimental to that end goal.
Very good. We have about 10 minutes or so left in the town hall. So if you have any questions, now's your time, specifically related to COVID-19. Dr. Figueroa, as we wrap up here, any misconceptions that you're hearing when it comes to either the virus or the vaccine? Anything that needs to be clarified or that the public needs to know about the time that we're in from a health perspective?
I think this is, first, I really appreciate y'all putting this together, because these are important forums for us to have these conversations. As it relates to the vaccine, it is going to take a while for us to vaccinate everyone, because right now it's limited production, limited availability. Like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to prioritize individuals who are at high risk of contracting the virus, but also, so it is occupation focused, but also individuals who are going to experience serious illness or death as a result. And so if you're not in those groups right now, it's not that we are denying you the vaccine, is that because of limited availability, we're prioritizing populations. And then two is, although we do have a vaccine, still be mindful that we have to take these hygienic precautions. Still wash your hands, still put a mask on, still practice social distancing, because the virus, as has been said earlier in the conversation, is still present and is more deadly now than it was before, and we're seeing increased hospitalizations. And so, yes, we can see the end, but still be mindful that we're still in the middle of it. So just be careful, because it's hitting our communities pretty hard.
Tracy, I think one takeaway from that is don't let your guard down, you know.
Absolutely.
And at one time when this first hit, we all went on lockdown, right? Everything shut down, and then things slowly began to open. And I think subconsciously, that's encouraged so many people to let their guard down and say, we're back to normal, where the reality is we're not back to normal. We're worse than when we first began.
That's right.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to, before we wrap up, Marvin, and thank you also for being gracious with your time. I know we're asking you a number of questions. I'm putting you on the spot here, but there's quite a lot said about, we have to keep up with our, wearing our face coverings and social distancing. Can you speak a little bit about face coverings? I think there's been much said about different types of face coverings, and can you just speak to what sort of resources the state may be providing to localities, if they are providing face coverings and other resources such as hand sanitizer to localities? And then can you also speak to just the efficacy of face coverings, and what are some of those things that, even though we're going to move forward and we're going to get this vaccine, what are some of the things that we need to ensure we keep doing even after we're vaccinated?
So it is exactly that. I think, the CDC, for example, has some general guidelines as to what qualifies as a face covering, and how to wear it appropriately. It has to cover both your nose and your mouth. And I think there examples abound of individuals not necessarily taking that seriously, but it has to cover both, right, for it to be efficacious. There are also going to be more guidelines coming out of the CDC soon about what is the appropriate use of a mask and how often you have to wash it in order for it to remain effective against preventing the spread. And so those things are going to come out, and I'm looking forward to sharing that information with the individuals on this call. But we still have to wear our masks. Like, even if you take the vaccine right now, the vaccine, it prevents you from experiencing a serious illness as a result of COVID. But I think we haven't necessarily figured out just yet whether or not it inhibits an individual from being able to spread that virus. And so there is still a lot that we're learning through this process. And so that mask, that social distancing, that washing of the hands is really important until we get to a point where we have that herd immunity that Dr. Walker Harris talked about earlier.
Dr. Figueroa, we have a great question here that just escaped as soon as I started talking, but I remember, oh, there we go. Shara Lachelle said, hey, at work, there's a debate regarding whether the vaccine contains active virus or not. Would you share if that's a myth? If I'm getting the coronavirus shot, are you injecting the coronavirus into me?
The answer is no. It is not an active virus. The Moderna or the Pfizer do not contain an active virus. It is new technology that the scientific community developed, where it teaches RNA technology. And so it teaches your body to create the antibodies that attack the virus itself, but it doesn't inject you with the virus. I can't go into the biology of it the way that Dr. Walker Harris probably could, but the answer is no. And if you go to the CDC website, you can check more information on that.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Deputy Secretary Figueroa. We have another question for you from Valdez, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, Jackson Wallace. And that question is, if you are in the current group, where do you sign up for the vaccine? We keep talking about these resources and where to find information. So just very practically, where do you go if you're in that first group?
Yeah, so so the first group, the 1A, is hospital personnel and long-term care facilities. And so if you are a healthcare personnel that is associated with a hospital system, then your hospital administrator is working to try to vaccinate, right? And so talk to that individual responsible for vaccination within that health system. If you're a non-health system affiliate individual, then you have to go to your local health department or contact your local health department, because the local health department in that region is developing the process by which they will identify healthcare personnel and also vaccinate them. In terms of long-term care, we are taking that seriously, just like every other state. CVS and Walgreens are helping to set up the clinics to be able to vaccinate those individuals. We've already done most of the nursing homes. The skilled nursing facilities are next, and we're almost done complete with them, and then assisted living facilities as well. And so by the end of February, we should be done vaccinating individuals in long-term care facilities. And that happens. And your long-term care administrator works with Walgreens or CVS to schedule the clinic for that long-term care facility.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for providing that information, Deputy Secretary Figueroa. We certainly, again, appreciate your time and wish you all the best as you transition to the Biden-Harris administration. We may still be calling on you and asking a couple of questions, but we wish you all the best and know that you're going to do well in that new position.
Well, I will say I'm a servant of all, so I'm looking forward to continuing to engage, and it's so great to see the Black and Gold here and participating and doing their thing. And I know that we wouldn't be able to do it without our sisters. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate today.
Thank you. We're so glad to have you. Tracy, there's so much more. This was just the tip of the iceberg tonight. The work continues even tomorrow. What can we look forward to, Tracy?
That's right. That's right. Well, first I'll say we just want to take a moment to thank everyone, right? So we want to thank our event organizers for tonight's town hall. Thank you to all of our speakers, all of our guests. And Brent asked the right question. What can we look forward to tomorrow? So we are going to hear from a number of statewide leaders. We invite you all to join us. We're going to kick things off tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Of course, you can follow these same platforms to join us. And so you can join us on YouTube or you can join us on Facebook. And we're going to keep the conversation going because, as Brent said, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
What I want everybody to do right now, before you leave, don't leave without hitting the share button on your Facebook page, because you were able to receive all this great information as evident in your comments. But guess what? We can share it with the masses, right? We want our brothers and sisters and our community at large to receive the same info. So this will live on the internet on the Phirst Pham Facebook page as well, and you can share it.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for your time this evening. We look forward to you joining us tomorrow morning. Take care.
Be good.